Hey guys, I found out some amazing news, which is that our sisters have the same name.
Oh no, Blair.
They have the same spelling too, which is crazy. Blaire.
Yeah.
That's not why we're here. We're here because this is Why Not YA. I'm Karah Preiss.
I'm Ebony LaDelle from Epic Reads.
And we're here with the amazing Ashley Woodfolk, who is the author of The Beauty That Remains. This is the paperback version, which came out last month. Yeah, it's last month.
Yes, last month now.
Yes, last month now. And we're very excited to talk about this book, this very, very beautiful book.
So thank you for coming in and speaking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So this episode's theme is going to talk about the negative and positive effects on social media, hence influencer, quote unquote. And so I'll do like a brief intro, oh my God, here, about what The Beauty That Remains is, and give a quote, and then we'll dive right into it. So The Beauty That Remains follows three people, Autumn, Shay, and Logan. They're kind of dealing with the tragedies of loved ones, and inevitably music brings them together, but also social media is a coping mechanism for them. It's really ever present in their grief and plays an important role in kind of like their hurt and their healing. So like I said, we started episodes with a quote. And we pulled this one. I think about the poem Yara left on Bram's video a month ago or so, how pissed I was about it. But now I get why she did it. There's something about being able to say things you never had a chance to that feels so damn good. So we'll touch upon the judgmental aspects of like social media in a second. But before I get to that, I read somewhere that this story came about because your husband moved across the country and you had this deep fear that something would happen to him and you would find out on social media. So can you talk about that?
So I have anxiety, and I've had it since I was a little kid. It wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult because I feel like especially in the Black community, like there's sort of a stigma related to mental illness. Mm-hmm. And my mom always just called me a worrier. And I'm like, if I'm calling your phone like 18 times in a row and crying and like leaving you voicemails because I think you're dead because you're not answering the phone, like maybe something else is happening. Maybe.
I don't think so.
So all that to say, I had anxiety. It was undiagnosed. And shortly after my boyfriend at the time, my husband now, moved away, I started having panic attacks.
Okay.
And I didn't necessarily know what was happening to my body. Like I had them in high school, like about homework mostly. And I think even when it was happening then, I thought, like, my mom would call them, like, my fits or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think neither one of us, we didn't really understand what was happening. Yeah. And so when it started happening again, I was like, oh, this is weird. Like, this used to happen to me in high school. And, yeah, I didn't really know what it was. So I sought help. Mm-hmm. It was the first time I had ever been to therapy, but I was like, this is not okay. Like, I can't be, like, sitting in a meeting and then just, like, not be able to breathe. Yeah. So after going to therapy for a while, I went to psychotherapy. And what they do is that's, like, a little bit more focused on, like, mindfulness and, like, thinking about, like, sort of what's behind everything, I guess, and sort of doing teaching yourself how to self-soothe. And one of the strategies that my therapist had talked about was figuring out what your catastrophic fear was, because most anxiety comes from a catastrophic fear. And so I realized that, you know, through sort of going there, journaling and like talking about it and all of that, I realized that my catastrophic fear was basically, it was two things. It was ending up alone, ultimately, but it was also losing people that I loved. And so, and specifically, in this situation, I didn't know, especially when my husband first moved away, I didn't know any of his friends out there. And so I was like, the only way that I would get news if something happened to him, because he wouldn't call me, and none of his friends know me, is like I would see it somewhere. And so I just like was terrified that something was going to happen, and that was how I was going to find out. So through like the suggestion of my therapist, actually, I started writing this story, and I had been journaling the whole time, but I sort of started writing the story of this girl who found out that her best friend died, like, on social media. And then, like, I wanted to basically write through it so that she would be okay at the end. Because that's another thing that you do in therapy is sometimes you just, like, write through that fear. So that you get to the end and you're like, oh, okay, even if the worst possible thing that I could imagine happened, I know at the end of the day, like, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It'll be terrible, but eventually it'll be fine. So yeah, that was kind of how that happened. And so I started writing this story and it became this bigger thing.
That's crazy. Amazing. But in such a good way that, like, you went through all those steps to get to this beautiful story.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really grateful to my therapist. I'm really grateful that
shout out to therapy.
Shout out to therapy.
Seriously.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong
You're
with
not
it.
crazy.
You can go to your therapist. You can go to brunch. You can have a good day. You know, like, you can have such a good day.
It's great. I was at therapy yesterday. It's awesome. So it was a process, but I think at the end of the day, and now, like, a lot of the things that I write are sort of me sort of working through things. And I think stories are more honest that way. Anyway.
Yeah. I think a lot of writers, like, that's the beauty of writing. I think a lot of writers write through their pain or through their issues. Yeah.
Writers have a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that based on what you were saying, like, because I used to have horrible panic attacks, especially in places where I felt like I couldn't get out. So it's sort of claustrophobia, but once you can identify what it is or name it, it becomes a lot easier to manage it. Yeah. And I think even though, like, there's now a larger discussion, like, culturally about mental health, it's still, if it's happening to you for the first time, it's happening to you for the first time. Like, it's not like, oh, I heard that person talking about a panic attack. That's what this, like, numb arm must be. Like, it's still really hard.
And it presents differently in everyone, right? Like, my cousin was having panic attacks, but she didn't know what it was. And at first, I didn't even know what it was. She was like, yeah, I was just, like, sitting at work and I just started, like, sweating. Yeah. Like, pouring sweat. And she was like, I didn't feel anything. Nothing had happened. And then I was, like, looking it up and talking to other people about it. And I was like, oh, that's a panic attack too. Yeah.
And also, I think sometimes, especially as women, like, we place so much on ourselves that I think the first time I had one was, like, as a full adult riding the subway. And I was just like, Ebony, chill out. You are not, you know, like, I recognize it, but I was like, no, you're not doing this today. You're not about to have a panic attack. You are stronger than this. You know, like, you try to, like, tell yourself that you're over it. And it's just like, that's not how that works, Ebony, you know? Yeah. So.
And I think it's important to, like, remember to be gentle with yourself because,
it's so
like,
true.
Like, now I recognize the signs before it happens. Like, it's definitely been happening a lot less since I started going to therapy and journaling and, like, dealing with my crap. Yeah. But, like, now I recognize the signs because I'm more in tune with my body. And if I'm like, oh, I'm getting warm, or, oh, like, this person is touching me and I would prefer if they weren't, like, on the subway or something, then I can just be like, okay, I'm going to get off at the next stop, collect myself, get back on the train. Like, you know, so I think it's important, to get to know yourself that way.
So the three main characters in the book are all dealing and reeling from the deaths of people they know and love. You know, Shay loses her twin sister to leukemia, Autumn's best friend dies in a car accident, and Logan's ex-boyfriend commits suicide. So I guess this is a question about the characters. Like, how did you talked about how you came to develop one character, but how did you build out the other two main characters, and you know, why did you decide to have all of them lose somebody really close to them?
Yeah. So before we start, I'm going to talk a little bit about commits suicide versus died by suicide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is not something that I really knew very much about. Okay. But I had been having, like, these kinds of conversations. Like, it was a combination of because I wrote this book and just because people are talking about this stuff more. And commits suicide is, like, similar to, like, commits murder. And it sort of puts the blame on the victim. Yeah. And it also is sort of stigmatizing language. So I prefer if we use died by suicide.
Yes, teach us.
That's actually the first time, and I am fairly, like, in tune with
totally.
Conversation,
Yeah.
No,
that's the first time I've heard that too.
I literally just learned this last year. So like no judgment at all, but died by suicide. And like I also was like, I was listening to this is totally like off topic, but I was listening to this podcast about veterinarians and how in that profession there's a lot of suicide.
I know about that. My husband, he's a future vet, so I know very much.
It's like terrifying.
I read about an article in the Washington Post about this. Like,
and so I was listening to this podcast that was talking about that, and they were talking about also like that was sort of like reinforcing like the died by suicide thing, because it's like these people, they love animals, they get into it for, you know, all the right reasons, and then they end up having to kill animals a lot. Yeah. And so to use that word in that context is also, or to use commit in that context is also really stigmatizing. Because like the whole reason that a lot of them die by suicide is because they have been forced to murder. You know? So anyway, all that to say.
Thank you for that clarification. No, I've never heard that.
So to get back to the question. So yeah, when I first started writing, it was very much Autumn's story. And it started as sort of like a short story. But I think everybody's pretty familiar with like the 5 stages of grief and like how you sort of go through, you know, all these different feelings or whatever. But I think often people experience, like they say the 5 stages of grief and like you're supposed to go through them in like the 5 steps, but I think everybody experiences grief very differently. And so some people start right away with the anger, or some people start right away with like the denial. Some people start right away with the depression, and like, you know, it's very, and some people try to pretend like it's just like not a thing that's happening.
It's sort of like how Autumn was just like completely a shell of herself versus like Logan, who was just like everybody. I'm just, you know,
like all the
I'm
feelings.
coping in different ways.
So when I first started writing it, I wanted to have a character who, I was very much in the depression stage. And like another thing that came up in therapy was that even though, you know, nothing bad had happened, to my boyfriend / husband, I was still grieving because I was going from seeing this person who I saw every single day, who I lived with, to seeing them maybe every 6 weeks if I was lucky, you know? And we were also like both very early in our careers. We didn't have much money, so we weren't visiting super often. And so it really was a loss, you know? So I was like dealing with like loss or whatever. And so I was very much in the depression stage, but I also I didn't want anyone who had experienced loss and who maybe came across this story. I didn't know it was going to be a book yet, but like, I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll post it on my Tumblr. But I didn't want anyone to feel like, I guess, isolated by the story, right? Like if you're reading it and you're really pissed off, I didn't want you to think like, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me kind of thing. And so I sort of wanted to add these other characters who were experiencing grief in different ways. I have I think I have a little bit in common with each of them. Like I started writing it as Autumn specifically because like that was just where I was at the moment. But I do think I have like a lot of anger inside of me, and a lot of it I am afraid or I guess hesitant to express just because of like the angry black woman like stereotype and like I don't know, like wanting to appear a certain way and like, you know, be taken a certain way. And so Logan was sort of my outlet for that. I'm just like, Logan's gonna say and do all the things that I would not.
I really felt Logan.
Right?
Yeah, right? Maybe I was also kind of like living vicariously. Not vicariously, but living through him.
And I wanted him to be able to like say and do all the things that I was like unable to or had been unable to say and do. I'm getting more ballsy as I get older, but like I definitely as a teenager was very I hid my anger a lot. And then with Shay, I really wanted a character. Shay changed the most throughout like the editing process. But I wanted a character who just wanted everyone to think that she was fine. And to ultimately be the character who found acceptance first, I guess. And so that's that's sort of where Shay came from, like out of the like everything's fine, nobody look at me, because I have that inside of me as well, like not wanting anyone to worry.
I really relate to that. It's also a thing about like ownership of feelings. I think anger is the same. Like, it's hard to be angry if you don't think that your feelings are valid.
Exactly.
And once you can be like, okay, my feelings are real, then you can be angry. That's been my experience.
No, that's totally true. Yeah.
And I thought that was well told, so to speak.
Thanks.
So Logan and Bram's story is very interesting because, and I don't always see stories like this, especially in YA, that, you know, Bram is a football player who falls in love with Logan, and they date for 9 months, and then he breaks up with him after falling in love with a girl, and Bram ultimately goes on to become a YouTube sensation until there's a sex tape posted onto his account and outs him to his followers. This is where we sort of want to bring up the topic of like the dangers of internet fame, which I think anybody who's a millennial or Gen Z knows about, and how you, even as an author, have learned to balance sort of your public and private persona, and if you felt like pressure to be more public than you want to be. So I guess it's 2 questions. I guess first, like the dangers of internet success and how you talk about that through your characters, and then also like for your personal life, how do you deal with success on the internet?
Yeah. So as far as like Bram goes and like his storyline, I was dealing with a lot of my own like sexual orientation questioning as I was editing this book and asking myself a lot of like really hard questions, and I wanted to write a character who was kind of complicated in that sort of way. And that there were people who like didn't get it. And like I still feel like with Bram there were things that I did well and things that I didn't necessarily do well, because I do know that it's like, now I identify as bi. I do know it's a bi stereotype that like you like bi people cheat and bi people want everyone and all of that kind of stuff, and that was not what I wanted Bram to represent at all. I wanted him to be more of like, love is complicated and like it's hard to know, feelings change, and you can also be in love with 2 people at the same time and like have to deal with the fallout of that or like the complications of that, right? So that said, at my college, there was a kid who's, I went to Rutgers, and this happened after I graduated, like well after I graduated, but there was a kid who was outed because of a sex tape. And he ended up dying by suicide. And that story really, really stuck with me because, 1, because I was figuring out my crap, and 2, because I, like, on this sort of ties into the social media part of it. On social media, I know so many people, like authors and otherwise, who have had to sort of defend their identity in some way before they were ready to.
That's so true.
Yeah. And so, like, I sort of wanted to bring that up in a way that was like, you know, in this situation, this person was not ready to have that conversation, or, you know, was not comfortable yet talking about that publicly. Or not even publicly, but just like on the internet. Yeah. You know, like, and so yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but like,
no, totally.
I feel like it's a difficult thing to balance, especially when you're still trying to figure yourself out, and so many teenagers and adults are still trying to figure themselves out, you know?
And like, as people, we even have to consider an online persona.
Right.
Like, you know what like, it's not, I mean, yes, if you're famous in some way, you've always had to in the past, like, have a public life.
Right.
But like, now, average Joes and Janes, like, have to think about what their public persona is because of social media. So it's like this added element of consideration when you're going to make a decision about yourself or a declaration that I just think it wasn't there like 20 years ago.
It wasn't. Yeah. And I mean, I always say that like labels are actually for other people.
Right.
They're not for you.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you have to take them on because people demand them of you, especially if you have any kind of public persona.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other reason why I wanted to make Bram like sort of this like YouTube like personality is because I think what often happens when someone with a public platform dies is that there are all these other people who have a reaction when they don't personally know or love that person, and how isolating that can be for people who actually know and are like experiencing that loss, you know, on a very personal level. And I wanted some reason for Logan to be even angrier. And I feel like that was like a good, like, you know, and everybody's so judgmental about the way that other people process grief, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, the fact, like the quote that you read,
the quote,
when, you know, Bram's girlfriend posted a poem and Logan's just like, why did she do that?
Yeah.
You know? But everybody processes this stuff differently, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, oh, wait, I guess I didn't answer the author part of it.
Yeah. Only if you want to.
You kind of did, because you said you were dealing with your own
And I mean, I think I'm still, like, thinking about that now. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a baby in here. And me and my husband have been talking about, like, are we going to post pictures of the baby? Like,
I've had this conversation with a lot of people.
And also, if someone babysits the baby, like, are they going to post a picture? Like,
are we going to ask everyone who interacts with this child to not take pictures?
Exactly.
Right.
So it's, I don't know. And I know, and even, like, beyond that, like, the kid and their relationship to technology. Like, I have a friend who, her and her husband decided that her daughter wasn't going to be able to use screens until she was 3. And, like, that's, like, iPads, phones, like, TV, like, everything. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. So it's a lot. It's a lot of hard questions to answer.
Okay, so continuing with that, let's talk about the effect social media has on, like, your mental health. So Belletrist marketing director, I guess.
Yeah, Paige.
Yeah,
she works.
Paige. Shout out to Paige.
She works on everything with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She spoke on a podcast recently about rehabilitation clinics for drug and alcohol addiction. They're starting to add social media to it.
Oh, wow.
There's like a syndrome called phantom vibration syndrome where you feel like your phone is vibrating even if it's not, because you're used to so many notifications.
Oh my
It's too real though.
Studies have found that like brain chemicals get released when people like your photos and comments.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and then like there are things like in our feeds like red notifications and all those things that are designed to kind of foster addiction.
Yeah.
So everyone deals with social media in different ways in the book. Autumn through emailing and refusing to deactivate her friend's social accounts even though she like has the password. Logan by watching Bram's videos, and Shay with her and her sister's blog. So how did you determine how each character would use social media in their grieving, and which character do you feel was like helped by it the most and hurt by it the most?
So, whoa.
It's a loaded question.
I sort of, that part of it actually came in at the in the very last edit.
Oh, wow.
Like Bram was always a video person,
Yeah.
but as far as like the like chapter headings
Yeah.
where like they're like actively interacting with stuff, like that
It's so
came
cute.
in.
I love it.
Thanks. Like that came in last because I was I wanted something that like tied them all together because
Exactly.
it felt a little bit disjointed as I was going through and editing. And so yeah, that came together at the last minute, but I knew that Autumn, I mean, the other stuff like that is in the prose. I just feel like social media is so a part of everyday life that it would be unrealistic to leave it out.
Yeah.
Unless they were like, I don't know, in a cabin in the woods where they like had no Wi-Fi or something. But so that part was always there. But I think that it's often a source of comfort, right? To go to social media or the internet in general. Like, I mean, if you're at a party and you feel awkward, like the first thing you're gonna do is like go into the corner and be like, oh, I totally have a million text messages right now. I'm so busy on my phone. I'm not lonely at all. Like, you know, it's sort of like a comfort thing. And so I feel like grief is like one of the most isolating experiences that you have, even though weirdly, like, everyone has experienced it. But I think because the different ways that we deal with it is so stigmatized, and because people don't know what to say, and it makes everyone uncomfortable, like, it's a very isolating experience. And so I think you would be more likely to, like, sort of fall into that for comfort, because it's something that you can do alone, but not feel alone, right? It's something that is very, very normalized. And so I just feel like it would just organically start to happen. With Autumn, it made the most sense for her to reach out to continue to write to her friend, because she had already like her personality was very isolated anyway. I think often when you have like one best friend, when you're like, this is my person, and I've had this experience, like, you just think that person is the only person who understands you. And then you're like, if that person is gone, then nobody gets me. Like, there's no one left. And so it would make sense for her, I think. Like, as I got to know the characters, it made more sense, like, for, like, what they would interact with the most. And so it made the most sense for her to be, like, sending these G-chats to her friend, or, like, writing these emails to her friend, even though there was no one on the receiving end of them, right? For Logan, I mean, I feel like everyone has done this, right? Like, if there is a way to look at a person who you like or used to like or whatever, then you're gonna do that. Like,
Venmo. People do. Venmo trolling is real.
I just saw that.
Like, it's just like proof that they're still there. Yeah. Like, that you didn't imagine, like, your interaction with them. Right. You're like, oh, wait, this is still, like, a person who exists in the world. Or even if they don't exist in the world, you're like, oh, this was a person who used to exist in the world. And so, you know, because Bram was this, you know, YouTube person who, like, everyone watched, and like he was just doing this dumb stuff on camera, but it was like very much his personality. Like, that is very comforting to like return to again and again and again. So yeah, I just felt like that made sense for Logan to do. And then who's left? Shay. And then for Shay, I always knew that her and her sister were going to be involved with the band, but I didn't necessarily know how or why. And sort of as I edited and that became more clear, her sort of rereading these reviews that her sister wrote for these albums just like it sort of brought everything together in a way for me. And I hope for people who are reading the book. And I wanted to give Sasha a very like sort of visceral way to be doing these reviews, or at least writing these reviews, because like, and this is like really intense and probably nobody else got this, but like your senses are something that only belong to you, right? Like the way that you see things, the way that you hear things. And so for her to have these reviews that sort of go through like sounds like, feels like that person, that individual's feelings and the way that they experience the world is gone forever now that they're not there anymore. And that was something that I just kept thinking about like over and over again as I was like writing this book, is that like once somebody is gone, like their way of seeing the world is gone forever. But I wanted a way for that to like live on, I guess.
That's so crazy, because that's like one of the questions. Like, she had a blog post that showed up later on that was entitled, "If you're reading this, I'll never turn 16." And I just thought that was so interesting about just like how aggressive she was and just continuing to write these posts and, you know, just wanting to be remembered. She was so young when she passed away, which you basically answered that question. But yeah, it was just a really interesting part of the story.
Yeah, I think I was like on Tumblr or something, and I saw...
Shout out to Tumblr, which I still use a lot.
I mean, it's really sad now.
I know.
Like, how much they, like, censor everything. But
yeah, that's
whatever.
True.
whatever. I have a lot of Tumblr feelings. But I actually don't use it as much as I used to now. But I think I was on Tumblr and I was looking at the queued posts because I used to queue posts because I was like, I don't want everybody to know that I've been on Tumblr for 5 hours. Like, I'll just post this tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
And I had never looked at like, I guess how far in the future you could schedule things, but I like did one day. And then I think I was on Twitter and someone like retweeted something that was like a posthumous post. And I was like, whoa. And it was like one of those things that auto-fed. It wasn't like this person had queued it.
Right.
It was like from like some music app that people probably don't even use anymore. It was like Last FM. But it would like just show like what you were listening and it would auto feed to Twitter. And that happened for someone who had died, and then somebody retweeted it and I saw it and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like sort of, I think, you know, in the same way that Sasha was sort of obsessed with sort of like leaving her mark or whatever. Now that social media and like the internet is like this thing that we're constantly like sort of feeding ourselves into, everybody is gonna like inadvertently leave something, right?
That's true.
And so it's always gonna be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's this just crazy digital archive.
Right.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Right.
Think about
of like the human experience.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to get rid of. Like
Yeah.
Facebook does not make it easy for you to delete stuff.
No.
I was just talking to someone about that. Do you want to ask your question? Or should we
Well,
go
you
to...
kind of talked about this, like judging people's people's comments. When you feel like, oh, they didn't know this person as much as I did, but how Bram kind of, or not Bram, Jordan kind of comes around to someone posting something, and it's like, well, even if I don't feel like they knew them as much, they're still going through grieving in their own way, and they might have been touched by this person in their own way. So can you kind of just talk about why you kind of had Logan come around to that conclusion?
Yeah. I think when you're sort of in the thick of your own feelings, it's harder to be compassionate to other people.
Yeah.
But then I think as you sort of start to work through your own and like be more honest with yourself, it's easier for you to like see where somebody else might be coming from. So I thought that, you know, it would be important for Logan's like character development for him to sort of like renege on that and be like, wait, actually, I understand why somebody might want to do this.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that, you know, I have all these unsaid things, right? That I'm sort of torturing myself over. And here's this person who just like said the thing.
Yeah.
And he sort of saw like the closure in that and the power in that. And eventually he does do that in his own way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was important for his like character development, his healing, for him to get to the point where he's like, oh wait, like everybody deals with this differently. That was her thing. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not like competitive grieving.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think sometimes it feels
that way, especially with
It
celebrity.
does.
I mean,
Yeah.
or like you just notice that people, especially when someone dies young, it's like people come out of the woodwork to sort of co-opt the conversation because like, oh, I knew this person best, or I had this story with this person.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you're not posting that before they die. It's sort of like as a way to,
or if you're grieving and you're not posting enough and people are judging you because it's like, you lost such and such, why aren't you putting yourself out there more?
Right.
So very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I'm not taking sides or anything, but you know, Ariana Grande dealt with that with
Right.
Mac Miller's
Yeah.
death. Like, it's not like, and that's what's so interesting about your book is like, it's not like you're making these are very real issues that like both celebrities but also just like normal people have to deal with as like people online.
And I think the weird thing about relationships in general is that no one but the two people actually know all that has gone on in their relationship.
So true.
Romantic and platonic and whatever. Like, I mean, I have extremely close relationships with people that, like, nobody really knows about.
Yeah, that's so true.
And, like, there are things that different people in my life know that other people in my life don't know about. And, like, you know what I mean? And it's, you know, when someone it's very easy to sort of make yourself into the most special person.
Totally.
Especially when you're in your feelings about something. Which, like, grief is, like, the most in your feelings you could ever be. And so it's easy to sort of make yourself into, you know, the most special. But I think, I mean, Autumn even deals with that too, where everybody keeps telling her, like, you're not the only one who lost this person. Like, I get that you're sad. I get that she was your best friend. But, like, I loved her too. And my feelings are valid too. And I think it's hard to see that when you're like in it. You know?
Totally. So as an aside, we don't really this doesn't have so much to do with your book, but we do this thing called the Bellatrix Brief, and hopefully you'll do it so we can actually send it out as well on our newsletter. But we just ask a few questions that are more personal, like about your reading life. So one of the first questions is like, what is your favorite indie bookstore?
McNally Jackson.
So this book deals heavily with music. Are there like songs that you listen to or musicians that you listen to a lot of when you were writing?
Yes, I actually have a playlist on Spotify.
Oh, nice.
That's all you got to say.
Okay.
Can people follow Ashley? Can people follow you? Like,
I can also send you the link.
Oh, that'd be great. You could put it in the brief because that would be awesome.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Is there a podcast that you recommend that you like to listen to?
Okay, so this is a new podcast, so I obviously like wasn't listening to it when I was writing this.
Right.
But it's actually by another YA author. Her name's Mary H.K. Choi.
Oh, yeah.
She does a podcast called Hey Cool Life, and it's about like mental health and creativity. And she's just like super vulnerable on it, and she talks a lot about like her experiences with like mental health stuff. I don't know. I find like a lot of utility in it because she gives like these very straightforward ways of like thinking about things. I also just enjoy her voice.
Yeah.
Because she has
like
a
her
really
writing.
great
Yeah,
voice.
She does. No, you're right. I was just talking to one of my coworkers about this.
Really?
About her voice specifically.
I haven't heard the podcast. I have to listen to it.
It's really, really good. And they're mini pods. So they're only like the longest one is like 15 or 17 minutes. Like most of them are like between like 12 and 15 minutes. So I like listen to it when I'm taking a shower.
Oh, that's a good one.
And yeah, it's just very, very, I don't know, there's something super validating about it. She talks about like the creative process and how like it's really hard and like all the different stuff involved with like sort of being a creative person and existing in the world and still having to like be a normal human.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to listen to that.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jane in the back. That's who I was talking to about it. I couldn't see her.
Are there any beauty products, hair products, like makeup, food, clothing that you want to give a shout out to, like brand?
That's your thing. That you
Yeah.
have to have.
That's my thing. I'm obsessed with Free People. Like this is from H&M. But that's because I'm pregnant. And although, no hate on H&M. Like 90% of my wardrobe comes from Free People. So I'm obsessed with them. Hair products, I use mostly like natural things. And also I cut like the majority of my hair.
Yeah, in your author
like,
photo, for example.
I
don't know if you can see this, but you have a bit of a different look.
Yeah. I had really long locks for a really long time. And I cut them off last year, I think. And it's great having short hair. But I use like coconut oil in my hair. I have like some like bougie, like all natural shampoo. I don't even know. It has like peppermint in it, so it like tingles when you're like washing your hair. I don't even know the name of it. I swear by, there's this brand called Amara Organics, and I use all of their like face stuff. So I have like the face wash and like the moisturizer and the serum and whatever, and like I started using it before my wedding, which was like 3 years ago. And like I started using it like a month before my wedding, and my skin was perfect. Okay? And so ever since then, I'm like, every time I like run out or I like stop using it or I'm being lazy and I just like don't order more or whatever, my skin like freaks out. But it's like all natural and super super lovely and not too expensive.
Amara
which is nice.
Organics.
Yeah.
I'll look that up. I'm like obsessing over skincare products right now. So
Oh, really?
I'm always into hearing something new.
Since I got pregnant, I've been using Burt's Bees belly butter so that I don't get stretch marks. And I don't have any stretch marks. That's what I was going to say. Like, I feel like everybody should just use this on all of their skin, like, all the time. Because it's amazing.
So that's a Burt's Bees product?
It's Burt's Bees belly butter. And I mean, I definitely use it on my belly, but I use it on my boobs and my butt, everything that's like stretching.
Also,
right now.
if you want to freak your parent out, buy it and like see if they respond to it. Like, is there something you want to tell me?
Yeah, but it's like a super nice, like rich cream. It's hypoallergenic, so like if you have allergies, it won't break you out. I have super sensitive skin, so there's like weird stuff that I can't use, but yeah,
that's cool.
I think those are my things.
So, what are you working on right now? You said you're working on you have another book coming out.
I'm working on so many things. So I just finished my next YA novel, which is called When You Were Everything. And it's
Good titles.
It's a friendship breakup story. So more tears.
That's my jazz.
But ultimately uplifting, much like this book.
That's true.
It's not as sad as this book, I'll say that. And yeah, so it's about these two girls, Cleo and Layla, who are not friends anymore, but you don't necessarily know why. And it's told in the then and now. And so in the now, they're not friends anymore. They hate each other, but you don't know why. And the then, it's slowly like revealed what happened.
Okay.
So I'm really excited about that one.
Ooh, I want to read that.
It is.
Did you finish? Is it finished now?
It's finished.
Oh.
It's finished. I think that I should be getting ARCs shortly.
Okay.
When does it come out?
It doesn't come out till next year.
2020. Okay. Look out for that.
Like this time next year, I think.
When
Like
We
March.
Were Everything.
When you were everything. Yeah.
It's a great title.
And I am working on a Barack and Michelle Obama biography, which is really exciting.
Wow.
Yeah, it's terrifying because I've never written nonfiction in my life.
Wow.
It's super scary, but it's challenging in like a good way.
Yeah.
And I'm learning a lot. So,
that's so cool.
Yeah, but it like sometimes feels like homework in a way that like, but I mean, if you're going to do homework, doing it about the Obama is like the best kind of homework.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And are you like on Instagram, on Facebook, just for like the audience? What's your handle?
I'm Ash Writes on Instagram and Twitter and Tumblr. I don't really check Facebook.
Okay.
So.
Cool.
Make sure you follow us, facebook.com/Y9YA Books. Follow us on Epic Reads. Follow us on Belletrist. And thank you so much for coming in.
That was really fun.
That was a really good conversation.
Are you now at the end of it being like, that was just a nice conversation?
It was lovely.
Like sitting on the couch on a Friday night, sans the wine.
Some belly butter.
And a belly butter.
You know, like a glass.
And coconut oil. That's all we need.
I'm saving it for when I go to California.
Oh, nice.
True.
It's wine country.
Yeah.
I'll have like one every couple of days.
It's fine. I know babies that are fine.
Oh, yeah.
I'm fine.
No, once you get to the third trimester, it's okay.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. All right, well, thank you so much, Ashley. Bye, guys. Have a great night, day, whatever.